This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I am here with Nick Mavromatis, who is joining us all the way from Greystone Winery in New Zealand. How are you today?
Yeah, good.
So we have a kind of first few days of the fall here, autumn in Toronto.
Well, this is lovely. I come from, it was snowing.
Really?
Of
course.
Or 2 days ago.
Yes.
A bit of a long flight to get here, but the weather's amazing. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Now, your winery, tell us a little bit about it, because you've been with them for about the last 3.5 years or so?
Yeah, just coming up to nearly 4. So I was with Pyramid Valley before, and now I've come to work with these guys. Great team there, all organically managed in there. So it's coming up the limestone slopes of North Canterbury in the Waipara Valley. So in the northern area, which is Omahi there. You're really famous for the clay-rich soils on the base, and that's where the limestone breaks down into the clay that we have through there.
And you get much more alluvial soils down in
just in the central part of the valley. So the history in terms of North Canterbury is the larger region. Waipara is the sub-region within that we're in. Traditionally, there were some Germanic plantings in the centre, Riesling, Pinot Gris that were in there, and those were the older ones that were a little bit more famous, coming up through the 1980s, etc. In that region. That's actually why one of the reasons my family came over there. My dad actually planted some of those original vines.
Really?
Hence the Greek name.
Yes,
in New Zealand. So early 80s, having a look at things in there, and then over time people started pushing the boundaries a wee bit more and planting in some of the little back corners of the valleys that were a little bit hot, a little bit more microclimate in there, looking at some of the clay soil, some of the limestone that was there, and changing the mix, and they're heading more towards Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, which is where we are now, probably most famous for our Pinot Noir.
So how much of your production is Pinot and how much is Chardonnay approximately?
Out of our plantings, about 60% is Pinot Noir, and about 20% is Chardonnay. Obviously, the Pinot Noir is a lot lower cropping.
Yes.
We're lucky if we get about 4 tonnes a hectare off our main block, 1 tonne a hectare off our really hardcore limestone block up the top. So that obviously drops it down.
And you also have some Sauvignon Blanc planted in the valley there.
Yeah, we do something a little bit different with Sauvignon Blanc. We just wanted to have something a little bit more textural and style there. We're lucky to have a really great viticulturist with us who thinks outside the box a little bit. And he went through, and we've got the complete, our clone selection is only from the Loire Valley. So 2 clones there. I don't think anyone else in New Zealand does 100% Loire Valley clone Sauvignon Blanc.
Right.
Then it's all wild fermented entirely in barrels, so barriques that have been used for at least 5 years, so no obvious oak influence. A little bit of partial malolactic in there, that's just the way it rolls while we wait for some of the barrels to go dry in there. But we think it gives a really lovely richness in there, a lovely texture from the barrel as well. The Loire Valley clones are much more golden in flavour, I think, than the green style, which is the MS Bordeaux clone that's more predominant in Marlborough there. And so something that we really love, that sort of weighty richness, a little bit of mealiness that you get in there. Obviously the barrel, a little bit of oxidation that occurs in there as well. We do make sure that we, after we press it, we make sure that we really get all the gross lees and solids out straight away before we put it into barrel, because Sauvignon Blanc has a habit of being quite reductive in there if you do that. So we want to make sure that it's still quite nice and obvious clean fruit in there, but with just extra weight and texture, and I think that's what we really go for in that style. I think through everything that we do as well, we want to have a lovely purity of fruit in our style. You can see that across the range.
Now, we were talking earlier about wild ferments, but you tend to take the whole concept of the wild ferment a little bit further at Greystone. Yeah,
we were playing around, and it's actually become a real thing. So we were familiar with other people taking the ideas of a Pierre de Couve and making a starter in the vineyard and then bringing it to the winery. And we sort of thought, well, actually, there's obviously lots of native yeast floating around the winery, and it's it's 24-hour life cycle on Saccharomyces. So how long does that actually take before we get winery influence occurring in here? So what we came up with was, let's just take it all out to the vineyard and ferment it out there. So we'd pick it in the rows, in the 1.5 ton fermenters in the rows, leave them out there, and let the whole fermentation occur. And so we different clones and different rows, and we started doing that, and it gradually became a thing for us, where now we're actually going to release our first one really soon, actually, of exclusively vineyard ferment. Previously we've been blending it in, and it was quite an interesting parcel, and more people coming out and tasting out of barrels, and wine writers going, hey, you should do something with this, like have a look at it. It was very different. It was always juicier, sappier style. We were testing it, having a look at the yeast. The yeast was a completely different style from what we were getting in the winery. About 0.5% alcohol on average, just regardless of year. We've been doing this since 2012. Every year, 0.5% alcohol less out there. And we were, I guess it's the inefficiencies of the natural yeast, or the less performing, and not as sort of well fed. If you take a sourdough analogy in there, that they're coming, they take a lot longer. We're looking at 12 days last year before that ferment was kicking off.
And what did those 12 days add to the mix? Because that's a reasonably long soak.
It is a long cold soak, and obviously it's autumn or fall, should I say, over here. Out there you're seeing that diurnal temperature variation is fairly large where we are. We're fairly far south, but we have quite warm days. We can get up to high 30s in some of it. By the time autumn rolls around more sort of 20 degrees, and then it might get down to 4 or 5 overnight. So it takes a while for that yeast population to get ready. And then when it kicks off, it actually goes through faster than the ones in the winery. So I don't know whether it's just sort of building up its strength, ready to go, and then it rolls through. Part of that's just the beauty of natural ferments, and you're just having a look, and it does what it does. It's not controlled.
And did you find any aromatic changes at all, or do you think that was more true to the actual vineyard or block in the vineyard?
Well, definitely some aromatic changes, but we're not really sure.
Right.
We can't really analyse that enough to see what's the component, because part of that is we've got different clones in different areas as well. So we were looking at some clonal differences. We were taking parts from one clone and putting it into another. Some in the winery, some outside, and having a look at that. But there's a lot of different variances in there, and I don't know, it might take another 20 years
to actually to work out the exact flora and fauna of said vineyards.
And that's one of the things we're really lucky is that Dom, our winemaker, and Nick, our viticulturist, have been there since day dot, and I think that's more important than vine age, is actually having a team of people who understand what's going on,
of course,
and working together and actually getting the best out of each side. And they're really great guys to work with. We're all, it's really open, and they have that view of let's experiment, let's try these things, let's see what we can do out here, let's try and get the best out of each site. So it was thinking about different kinds of clones, different kinds of ferment. How do we test this? Let's see what's different. If we use we brought in some amphora or tinaja from Spain for our fermentations, see what the difference is. We were looking at those that had
so very zeitgeisty right now.
We were just wanting to test out how it was going. But we didn't really sort of go out of our ways to sort of market these things. They were just something that we did. We wanted to do it more for ourselves, I think, than anyone else.
You mentioned that you've been practicing organic viticulture for quite some time, but were just recently certified.
Yep.
But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the whole thought about going biodynamic.
Right, yeah, so we do some biodynamic practices there. Jean-Yves, who works for us, comes from Foyard and some very good places in Beaujolais that have been working with that. And we do a lot of the preparation in there. My father, was talking about before, has done a lot of work in soil science, and I think the microbiome, looking at that, the health of the soil is incredibly important. I'm sure you've had people talking about that mycorrhizal relationship,
of course,
between vines. That's how they take up those trace elements. So the first thing is to remove your fungicides. You spray fungicides, you destroy that mycorrhizal relationship. They can't absorb those trace elements, which get you those fine little details to your wine. So you've got to take care of that first. Then secondly, you've got to have a healthy soil structure. And one way, people talk about, can you measure biodynamics? Well, the best way is actually measuring the weight of a square meter of soil. And if you've got biodynamics, it's a clear difference. It's much heavier, much richer in there. You get this a lot more life going on in that soil there. It's important there. Again, you're looking at compaction and other effects in there. But trying to get, that's why we use the cowpat pits. Trying to get that life in there is really important for us. I'm not down personally with the Mars is over here and the Moon is doing this. I think there are some impacts with the lunar cycles on it, but I don't know that we should necessarily take as gospel something someone wrote down 100 years ago that they may or may not have made up. in there. I think there are elements that are taken out of farmers' almanacs, etc., that are important. I remember having a bit of a brainwave at the New Zealand Pinot Noir conference in 2013, and I was talking to someone from Craigie Range, and we were talking about biodynamics and how it was being used. And as we were walking out through the room there, it's in Te Papa, the New Zealand Museum, they had the Maori calendar, traditional calendar there, and I happened to have the biodynamic calendar in my hand at the same time. And we were spinning through, and all the days matched up exactly. And I was like, hang on, how can this be? Like, so they've got a day when they're going to be planting kumara, or the sweet potato, that's a root day, and there's a day that they'll be fishing, which is a water day. How does this sort of stuff match up so much? There are parts of that that clearly do, and the reason would be you'd starve if they didn't work. They didn't have an option to go, well, we didn't get anything today, guys, we'll just pop down the shop. So there are parts of that are there, but we're willing to question, take the lot raison, like how you actually look at these things and go, well, I don't need to pick because the moon is over here. I'm going to pick because it's going to rain tomorrow and the fruit tastes ready to me. And I think it's important that is that understanding of your vines, understanding of the soil, and looking at your site, look at what's happening there. I think that's one of the most important aspects of being organic and biodynamic, is actually being out there and actually looking at those vines and taking care, and not being prescriptive, and it's just, well, I spray at this time.
Yep, no, that all makes sense to me, perfect sense to me.
And I think another thing too was I remember coming across, and I was looking at a vineyard down the road by a big corporate that I shan't name, and they were spraying, and they had guys working out there in the vineyard in full, sort of almost
hazmat suit.
Yeah, it was really sort of, sci-fi looking stuff. And coming past, and Miranda, who works in our vineyard at the time, was 8 months pregnant, and me thinking, if I'm sending staff out to work there, would I be happy sending my wife, who was pregnant at the time as well, out into that sort of stuff? And maybe that's the sort of dad being a softie sort of thing.
I'm with you on that.
But if people are going to go out and buy organic wines, they're actually saying, you know what, I'm supporting workers not having to go out to that environment.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't be okay to take those same chemicals and spray them on someone who was a bank worker. But it's okay to do it to guys who are in vineyards because we want to save a buck. That doesn't sit well with me. So there's a human aspect to that as well that I think is really important.
I hear you on that. Nick, on that closing note, thank you very much for joining us at Good Food Revolution today. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no worries. Cheers, mate.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Cool.